Welcome to my channel. My name is Hannah, and I'm gonna do a wrap-up of some of the books that I've read in the past week or so, end of February, beginning of March. So let's jump into that. An interesting one that I read was The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Dalila Harris. And this follows Nella, and she is an editorial assistant, and she is the only Black girl working at Wagner Books. And she has dealt with all the microaggressions, all of these issues, and finally there is a book that comes across that she feels like has a horrible caricature of a Black woman in it, and she doesn't feel like she can remain silent, so she mentions it in the meeting with the author and the editor she works for, and it kind of spirals out from there, and she isn't treated the same at work. At the same time, another Black girl is hired at Wagner Books, and so Nella is super excited. She's finally got Hazel. She's got this other Black woman that they can talk about it. This woman's gonna understand what she's been going through being alone at this editing house, and so it seems really promising, and then the plot thickens when everybody starts to really like Hazel, and she seems to walk that perfect line, and everybody likes her, and she's works harder than everyone else, but doesn't ever seem tired, and doesn't ever seem to let any of these microaggressions get to her, and Nella is like, what is going on? And so this book, so that's kind of like the groundwork of our synopsis here. And this book is kind of told as a thriller. And for me, like the first part of the book, that really was successful because it's taking these real world issues and really building on it, where I just could, feel my heart squeezing, like, oh no, something's gonna go wrong. Something is wrong with this new girl, Hazel. Like something isn't right. And what's going on at this workplace. Nella starts to get some threatening notes and what's going on with that. So I liked the beginning with the thriller. Then, I don't want to spoil it because I kind of recommend this book, but I don't feel like it ever ended up being super successful as a thriller. By the end, there were a lot of loose ends that never really came together for me. I just didn't feel like it all came together quite right. Not a great reveal, any of that. Where I feel like this book ended up being more successful to me was in kind of a social commentary. And in that way, I feel like this book is going to be floating around in my head for a little while. And there were lots of different aspects, like how Black women are treated in the workplace, and how people say that they are interested in diversity and learning from different perspectives, but they don't actually want to hear it. And there's like lots of different elements that I feel like are very interesting. Later on in the book, I feel like there's some good discussion to be had about the medical treatment of Black women and how historically they weren't always given the opportunity to understand what was happening to them and to give the proper consent to medical treatments. And so there's a lot of interesting elements in this where I feel like the main message that I got from this was that there are these stereotypes of what a Black woman should be in the workplace, and it's very harmful because nobody can be the hard worker but not offensive and just walking this fine line. It's not possible. But the book shows that there are women who appear to somehow walk that line pretty well. And what it does is it makes it so that the normal everyday Black woman doesn't have those opportunities because it's setting an impossible ideal that cannot be sustained. And if it is sustained, it's probably at a cost of personal values. And so, I would be interested. I give this book 3 stars. Do I recommend it? Yes, I want you to read it. Did I think it was like well done and good? Not really, but like there's enough ideas that are floating around in my head from it that I would be interested if anyone has read this book. And if you're interested in the premise and don't really mind if things don't really resolve in a super satisfying way by the end, but gives you a lot to think about, this book might be interesting for you. For just a really good read, I read The Sweetness of Water by Nathan Harris, and this is set in just at the end of the Civil War in the South, and you have all of these newly freed people and all of these newly poor and injured people from the Civil War that are all trying to build a life, and it's following specifically a family, George, his wife, and his son, and they believe his son to be dead, and he hires on two black brothers who are newly freed and want to move up north but need to make enough money that they can get to the north. So he hires those two and they become close. And this book is tragic, absolutely tragic. It was beautifully written though, like it was really well done. It was just all around excellent. Excellent in that it was written very well. I mean, if you don't want a historical fiction depressing book, don't pick this up. I mean, it is pretty heavy. What I really liked about this is that sometimes when I read books set in this era, I feel like the Black characters aren't given a very rounded out voice, and I feel like the brothers in this book were very fully fledged characters, and it was really well done that I felt like all the people were real people and nobody was just, well, some secondary characters might have seemed a little, okay, this is the racist neighbor, or, you know, like those kinds of things, like you have those elements, but all the main characters, I really felt for them. I had an emotional connection to these characters, and sometimes I feel like that doesn't happen, and I think this one was really successful in making me care about the characters, giving them a real voice. And the plot itself, it's tragic and probably nothing like groundbreaking in the story it's telling, but the way it's told is really well done. Okay, I am so angry at myself about this book. I read the book Today Will Be Different by Maria Semple, and this is the same author who wrote Where'd You Go, Bernadette, and this is following Eleanor Flood, and she's having a hard time, she's worried about her husband, and she has a son, and she might be going through some sort of breakdown, and kind of very similar to Where Did You Go, Bernadette, and I am so angry at myself because I listened to this book, listened to the entire thing, and I got to the end and I thought, this book is just forgettable. I got nothing out of it. Just thought it was kind of meh, which is too bad because Where'd You Go, Bernadette, I really did connect to Bernadette and I felt like I related well to her, but this book just gave me nothing. It was told in a very similar way to Where'd You Go, Bernadette, but it gave me nothing. So I went to go put it on my Goodreads, and would you know, this is the first time this has happened. I had read this book in 2019. I listened to the entire audiobook. I still have no recollection. I somehow read this book a few years ago and read the entire thing again. Never once crossed my mind that I'd already read it. So I don't recommend this. When I say forgettable, I mean it's literally forgettable. I mean, that's happened to me a few times where I've forgotten that I've read a book, I get a chapter or two in and I'm like, oh yeah, I've read that book, which is partially why I have started this YouTube channel so that I can keep track of my books a little better and feel like I'm really processing them and understanding them better. But this is just forgettable, and this is just sad. How did I read an entire book without none of it rang a bell? And I just don't recommend it. It's fine. It was kind of like watching a Hallmark movie or something. It's just entertainment, but completely forgettable. So I don't recommend this one, and I'm just so mad at myself that I completely forgot about it, and I don't know how that happened. If I do this again, then I'll know that it's a personal problem and not a book problem, but since it's the first time I've done this, we're gonna just say that it's the fault of that book for being so boring. I finally read The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde for the first time, and I know this is a classic, so I feel like anything I have to say on it is probably not super useful because everyone else has probably read this and picked it apart in an English class, and anything I want to say about it has been said 100 times. So I don't really know skip ahead if you feel like you already get this book. But I mean, if you haven't read this book, it's following, we kind of have three different men. We have our painter, Basil, we have Dorian, and he's the beautiful, young, handsome man that Basil likes to paint. And then we have Lord Henry, who's kind of our corrupting influence, who likes to throw out clever quips and kind of shakes the moral core of Dorian. And you kind of follow three different characters. And Dorian ends up like unwittingly making a deal with, who knows, the devil or something, where any sin that he commits doesn't show up on his own face. It shows up on this portrait that was painted by Basil. And I think there are a lot of interesting things you could discuss about it. I think this book probably required a much closer and intense reading than I'm willing to give it right now. Things that I did find interesting as I was reading it. Some of it was just, context and the time that it came out. I was surprised at how many, the character Basil is very much, he seems to be a queer character. And I thought that for the time that would seem shocking. And so I looked into it, and this was originally published as a series of magazine articles. And it was much more blatant in those articles. And because of the public outcry, the book is actually the tamed down version of this. So I thought that was interesting for the time period. Also, because of the time period, we also have some things that seem a little, off to a modern audience. There is some anti-Semitism, there's just the sweeping generalizations about women, and it makes you wonder if the character in the book has ever met a real woman, or maybe did the author ever meet a real woman, because the women in it aren't real people. The thing that I thought was interesting after I read the book, I went and read the Goodreads description, and it said that Wilde later noted in a letter, Basil Hallward is what I think I am, Lord Henry what the world thinks me, Dorian what I would like to be in other ages perhaps. Now, in what world anyone would want to be Dorian is completely beyond me, but I did think it was interesting looking at it maybe through that lens, because Basil, I feel like if he thinks that's what he is, I found him to be kind of the hero of the whole thing. And so, he was the one who had maybe the strongest morals. And so, what is that saying about Wilde or how he perceives himself? And does he find that to be a bad thing? And then I completely see, when I think of Oscar Wilde, I think of who Lord Henry was in this book. Just a bunch of clever quips without a ton of real meaning. I have a whole bunch of Oscar Wilde quotes on my refrigerator. It's all things like, morality like art means drawing a line somewhere, and only dull people are brilliant at breakfast. None of it really means a ton. I wouldn't say they're all that deep, but that's what Lord Henry is in this book, and I feel like I can see how that might be his public persona. So I thought it was interesting. Honestly, Since I didn't study this in an English class, I know I missed a lot and it deserved a much closer reading. So if anyone wants to tell me what they feel like they got most out of this book, please let me know, because I obviously have not studied it very thoroughly. Thanks for coming along with me on my book ramblings. If you have any thoughts on these books, please let me know. I would love to hear any opinions, especially if they disagree with what I came up with. And as well, please leave me any book recommendations, and I will see you all on the next video.